Life can be so challenging. Where can you go to get divine clarification, help, and advice? Well, may I introduce Natasha Venter, medium coach and direct connection to your guides and angels. Through her podcast, Life Clarifications, Natasha will help you navigate through and create your life's destiny. My name is Kevin McDonald, co-host of this podcast, and I've seen her work and know that through her incredible talent, you can be changed forever. So let's start another episode of Life Clarifications with Natasha.
And hello, everybody. We are still being very human and navigating through the technology dance. So please be patient with us as we are in the mode of, because this is our second live application towards life clarifications. And we are trying to just show how navigating through life happens. And, sometimes the only way to learn is to be an example. So I, Natasha Venter, am very human. I am one that I am very intuitive, but at the same time, though, humanness is part of the dance. And so with that, when we make mistakes, things don't go right. I would consider it more things don't go right than a mistake, because Kevin, who is doing the technology and is part of this dance, is very human in his dance. And I, in the midst of having 3 different lives, like most of us, we're all trying to do the better that we can. And so we are not always going to have things flow right. And if that's going to be the theme of today's show, I would like it to just be known that being human is part of our life experience. People sometimes say that we're spiritual doing the human dance. Some people say we're the human doing the spiritual dance. I say the cup is half full, half empty. We're spirituality in a human form, and we're all doing a dance trying to be on this planet. Would you agree, Kevin? And we do not hear you, sir. So there. There we go. You're just a little quiet.
Oh, well, no, okay. No, you're right. This is quite a dance trying to figure out how to make this flow the way it's supposed to flow and to be really cool. And but you're really cool, so it's easy to see it happen, and it's going to happen just fine. Let's talk a little bit more about you, Miss Humanness. Because you have got a few gifts that I'd like to talk about. Can we?
Sure.
Well, first of all, you are a intuitive. You
Yes.
are a medium. You also are a coach, an intuitive coach, correct?
Mm-hmm. I like to call it personal awareness coach, and that's a title that a friend of mine gave me. She says, because you don't necessarily help people get going in life, you find their inner workings to help them get going. And so that's why I like to bring out people's personal stuff, not necessarily to air dirty laundry. It's not about that, but that personal awareness so that we can be who we're supposed to be.
Well, then I've got a mission for us today. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time. We'll actually spend probably a great deal of time talking about this on this particular podcast, because I was reading today that in the state of Washington, where we both reside, that first of all, there's 7 million people that live here in Washington. And a psychologist was saying that as many as 1.5 million of us are suffering from what she called COVID depression. And it makes perfect sense, because everybody's lives have been just thrown up in the air, and who knows where we're going to land. But I wanted to talk to you about what your impressions of what we're going through is, and how we can do a better job of getting through it. Are there some tools that you can give us, some thoughts about how we can get through this whole mess, because it's a mess.
It is a mess, and it's a personal mess, because everybody's doing their own personal walk through this experience. And, even though we're a collective, that we're all one, and yes, we are all one, we're all in sync energetically. What's going on in Washington or down in South America, if we tap into that mindset, we can feel what's going on. Yet at the same time, we are personal, walking through everything. We're the one that has to or sit in the chair, lay in the bed, that has to be in our personal minds. And many of us have had so many experiences where our mind has ruled us, has said that I'm more important than any other part of me, our bodies, our spiritualness. And not everybody's connected with the spiritual work or the physical body to navigate through getting up and moving. A lot of us just sit there and in our chairs and go, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? We don't have that skill. Some of us don't have the knowing. Some of us weren't taught. Some of us don't have the inner chemistry, the chemistry of the body. Each one of us has a different chemistry of the body, the wirings of the inner mind, the wirings of the inner workings of who talks. And then we've got what we've been taught. If our families or closest friends were very anxious about things, then that's maybe a skill that we would have learned, was to be more anxious, because there was just something about it that was not necessarily appealing, but yet, sometimes, this is my observation, not a judgment, that there's many of us that got attention for having a certain emotion or a certain interaction. And even if it was a negative attention, like if we were always sorrowful, then somebody would come up and say, oh, what's wrong? Can I help you? And they meant it with love, maybe, sometimes not. But there's a part of us that says, hey, I kind of like that attention, you know?
Sure.
And I would even claim that with my ankle that I tweaked, a while ago, that, even it decided to say, hey, I kind of like sitting in the chair and not having anybody and people paying attention to me, and me not having to get up and do half the housework, and, all those different things. And I had to say, this is not the payoff I want from you. I even had to talk about that with a thing of my own self. And I've had to do that many different times in my life, but it's just part of that walk.
Okay, so let's break it down a little bit, because what I want folks to understand is, when we use the term "we are all one," from my understanding, we're not using that as a metaphor. We're not using that as a fake thing. It is an actual, real thing, that we are all one. We are all connected energetically and spiritually to each other. How do we get people to understand that, and to connect, and to be willing to make that, because I see a lot of people that go, oh, please, I'm no more connected to you than flying to the moon, or you're full of prunes, and whatever other thing you'd like to say. But how, in your experience, in your work, do you get people to understand that, yes, indeed, we are all one?
Well, I'm going to use a metaphor. How is our landlines of phones connected? How is our computers working? How am I in northern Washington and Kevin is in, more south of me by an hour and a half? How are we on Zoom and YouTube at the same time?
Hell, I don't know. And apparently we haven't done it that well very often, but
Yeah, I would agree. There's that humanness again. So if you think about it, if you apply what we do with technology, cell phones, and when we're texting somebody, do I need to have my mobile data on to do texting? Do I need my Wi Fi on to do texting? No, but we are connected in some fashion, one phone to another. And with that, that's kind of how we're connected. I kind of picture it like I do feng shui. I navigate with feng shui. And so there's something called the chi energy. And that chi energy is what flows between one room and another. It's kind of like what's flowing through my bookshelf is now kind of coming over and flowing across here, flowing around here, and then going out of the room. Well, that's the same thing. It's kind of like the wind. If I open up the door, the air's gonna come in from outside and it's gonna interact with me. And that's where we get connected because, if my neighbor is depressed, if my door is open more and my boundaries are down because my door is open, I might feel feeling a little funky right now. Why? Well, it might have been that chi, that texting type energy that kind of came along and said, "Oh, it's time to be a little more down right now, isn't it?" And that's part of checking in with what we have, what we are. I have this mantra: is this mine or is this somebody else's?
How do we, if we understand that we are all, we have a physical body, but we are also an energetic being.
Mm-hmm.
And if we understand that our energy can be affected by others and others can be affected by us, and we are depressed because of COVID and because of the situations that we find ourselves in, how do we, how do you teach somebody to work to get out of that negative energy and to build positive energy, which can then get them out of their depression?
Well, that's one thing that I've been, I can say that I have worked with anxiety. I wouldn't say that I'm an anxiety ridden person, but I have worked with it. Matter of fact, my husband was replacing the igniter in our stove, and I almost had to leave the house because I was so anxiety ridden that the house was going to blow. You know, I don't know where that came from. And I actually kind of said, okay, anxiety, why are you here? Why are you talking so loudly right now? Oh, maybe because the last igniter kind of blew the door of the oven open, you know?
That might be a good indication that maybe you didn't want to have that happen again.
Exactly. I know I have house angels and they saved us a couple of times. But at the same time, though, that anxiety was something that my husband even says, "What's going on with you?" He didn't recognize it because it was so loud. And I had to say, "Why are you here?" I had to acknowledge, and this is part of the dance of depression or a story going off in our head is, why are you here? Why is this happening? And I have practiced this very well because of going through depression after my parents passed, going through the grief depression, going through then depression, because I believe that grief has a different kind of depression attached to it. And so I call it the grief depression, and then I can call it just plain old depression. That I had both of those, and I had to actually become friends with myself. Friends with thyself. It's kind of an interesting process. And when I'm talking about, talking to like anxiety, I kind of picture it like I have a friend that's sitting right here, okay, a little bit closer than my plant in the back of me, and he sits kind of shoulder to shoulder, and and maybe it's called anxiety at that time. And I talk to that impression of whatever that emotion is, and I talk to it like a friend. So, anxiety, what are you here for? And the first thing I hear, and this is the practice, the first thing I hear, I just was a little fearful. Things could have big happen. We like our home. We like our things in our home. We like the animals that are in our home, and we like us in the home. And my husband was standing next to the stove, and I kind of like him.
Yeah, I was going to say he could blow up and end up in another room.
Exactly. And so talking with that, and then I kind of had to say, let's breathe. That was the first thing that I had to say to it sometimes is, let's just breathe. And this is something I've practiced. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm better at it or nobody's better at it or somebody's worse at it. It's just called practice makes better. And remembering that my parents passed away 20 years ago. So in my 30s, late 20s, early 30s, that's when my parents passed. And now I'm 20 years later, and I have had a lot of practice working with my emotions. And a lot of things that triggered me in that emotion, working with an alcoholic, kids. My youngest son is now a female transitioning, and glad, because she's the happiest she's ever been in her life. So it's one of those things that when we're working with those emotions and we're working with those triggers, many times we can navigate through something that we've never thought we can navigate through.
How do you, because you mentioned stories, how do you change your story so that it can change you so you're no longer depressed? How do you do that?
I wouldn't say that it's a switch. Well, it can be a switch for some people. I don't want to say nothing is possible, because, like my husband quit drinking and it was an instant thing. Some people have to go through a lot of work to do that. So everybody's an individual story, but the story, we can go. I kind of picture it like a mountain, and we're starting the road trip, and we have the lower side of a story and we have the upper side of a story. And I'm going to go through like the story of the year that my mom had Lou Gehrig's disease. And I'll give you an example. The low side of that story is that it was a hell of a year. I was really depressed. I just had a baby. I was dealing with postpartum depression. My husband quit I had to change jobs in that year. I sold 3 houses, bought one. It just, I had a 4-year-old. My mom, who was somebody who I didn't always have a great relationship with, but, we worked through things. My dad had just passed away 3.5 years before that. So I was still working through that navigation, and I just didn't know how I was going to do it. And those were some of the darkest moments in my life. There was times where I just said to God, if you can put my feet on the floor, I'll get up and I'll walk it. And then halfway through the day, I went, oh, it's saying some swear words. You put my feet on the floor. And I guess I did it, didn't I? Because I didn't realize that I had done it, because that's how low I was. I mean, I was basically eating chocolate graham crackers for dinner, lunch, and breakfast.
Those are good.
They are. I can't eat them anymore because I ate them out of
You
stress.
OD'd on chocolate graham crackers.
They were my cigarette. I don't smoke, I don't drink, so that was my go-to. So that is my, and if you noticed, and I'm not trying to go to the victim side, but there was a little bit of that angst. There was that trauma with it. There was that sorrowfulness with that. There was that, yes, it needed to be told, but it was exhausting. I didn't like who I was during that time. Okay, so that to me is the lower side. Okay, and that's where, if we stay in that story of the ouch, the pain of it, the guilt of it, the sorrowfulness of it, the shame of it, because I can say there was a lot of shame in that. I think if my dad didn't give me a tool of, remember what you knew at this minute in time, you know that tomorrow you'll have other information and you would have made a different choice. So forgive yourself for what you knew at that minute in time. I would say I used that mantra 16, 30, 80 times during that time, because I was so blooming tired, having a new baby, a 4-year-old, an alcoholic husband, changing jobs, mom with Lou Gehrig's disease, who stopped walking, basically stopped. She stopped walking and died within a year. So it was a fast-moving disease. So as my child was gaining mobility, she was lessening it. When my child started eating, she stopped eating. And God knew I needed a baby because I couldn't feed my mother. My husband had to be my mother. I couldn't do it. I was going through so much that I couldn't feed my own mother. And so with that, so there's that negative, the drama trauma of the story. There's the ache of the story. Now I'm gonna go. Okay, so that's the low end of the travels through the mountain. I'm gonna go and take more of the scenic route. I had a very tremendous year. I learned a lot about myself. My mom had Lou Gehrig's disease. I sold 3 houses, bought one. My husband even changed a job. It was very hard being a mother, new mother of a new baby, because my son was now 3 weeks old when I found out she had Lou Gehrig's disease, and I had a 4-year-old. But you know what though? That experience gave me a chance to dump everything out in my box so that I can go through my life story and say, I can do different now. And while I was being raw with depression and raw with everything, I just had an understanding that this was my time to just shift something in me. I don't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was time to shift, and I was willing to do it. And taking the walk, and that was the thing, is that I had to be willing to get up out of the chair, metaphorically. Some of us can't get out of the chair. Metaphorically, I had to learn to get up out of the chair and practice dealing with what was in front of me.
Which was at that point, because all of that had gone past. What were you dealing with at that point?
So after my mom passed, she actually did it the end of September. And so with that what I did was I tried to just start giving myself time. So there would be times where my husband would go to bed and I would sit in a dark house putting on a sad movie and just cry my eyes out. Cry my eyeballs out. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that.
Yes. And I gave myself permission. This was the key, that I allowed the emotion of sadness, depression, whatever it was, grief, whatever it was. I allowed it to be out and about. And I cried and I cried and I cried. I wrote nasty letters. Later, I burned them outside safely. I just did whatever I needed to do to be done with that emotion at that time. And then the thing that I chose to do is that, and I might have a tool that others don't, I don't know, but this is just an idea that I did, that the next morning when I got up and I felt like a wrung out wash rag, I felt like an old, tattered, wrung out wash rag. I woke up and I said, okay, depression, grief, whatever you want to call it, you had last night. Today, I need to get up and I need to do something. And even if it was just getting my kid off to school that day, that's when I was able to say that I allowed that emotion to have a voice. But I didn't let it have a voice all the time. I let it have a voice in the minute that I allowed it. And then the next day, since it's already had a voice, it was willing to let me walk in my day to day. And that's, I think, the observation, no judgment here. We all have a life story. We all do things differently. But my witnessing is that sometimes we have emotions that speak loud all the time. And we don't say, you had last night. You can't have this moment today. Today, this moment, I'm choosing to do something different. And even if that means, like my kids, when I was depressed or sad, they knew that if I turned on the Carol Burnett show, and there were certain scenes in the Carol Burnett show that I could not help but laugh. Mm-hmm. And so with that I would have to do something opposite of where I was at. Sometimes I would just play music and I'd be the only one in the house and I would dance. even if my kid was taking a nap, or I even danced with my young child. It's like I knew metaphorically that I had to do something that was opposite of where I was at in darkness.
Now, does somebody help you with that knowing, or is that something that you just came across in your own way and understanding that when you went through what you went through, and the depression is, and we all have our stories. Mine is like a bad country music song. And we all have them. It's just how we choose to deal with them.
Yes,
But you came out the other side with a knowing that was, you needed to change your story, you needed to change everything about what you were doing, or it was going to be the end of you. Is that
exactly.
right?
And I would say I didn't change my story. I changed my perception of the story.
Exactly, which is changing your
And
story.
yeah, so yes, changing the story. The story is still the same. It's just I'm changing my perception. Instead of being in it, sulking about it, just kind of always being here, letting it rule me, I decided that Natasha, had to be Natasha. And like I even told my husband the year after my mom passed, I said, I almost had to relearn how to be mom. I had to relearn how to be a wife. I even talked to my father in law because my parents weren't there anymore. I had to talk to my father in law and I was honest with him. I said, I don't know how to be a wife right now. I really don't know how to be a wife. Um, I can cook dinner maybe, but I was so detached from life. And, and so with that it was just saying to myself, I'm worthy of walking forward. And I use some of the skills that we talked about with our Monday show that we're doing, Life Between Lives, where there was a part of me that, I was grateful for my dad. He's the one that put me in front of the mirror and said, Natasha, you with depression, with dyslexia, and the depression that comes with dyslexia, you need to find love for yourself. And so he put me in front of the mirror and told me to stay saying, I love you. And then he also taught me that mantra. What I know at this minute in time, I can only say I know this. So tomorrow or the next minute, when I know other information, I'm going to wish I would have made a different decision. So yeah, I have to forgive myself. I have to have acknowledgement for myself that at this minute in time, I could not have made a different decision because I didn't have other information. And so move on and just know that you can do better with more information at another time. Mm-hmm. So when I came across with my uncle 3 years later when he had Lou Gehrig's disease and I was his power of attorney, so this was, within 3 years of each other, I found out that I was an only child, only grandchild. So 3 primary people in my life. On one side of my family, I was the only child, only grandchild. That 3 people, my mom's brother, I had to do caregiving for him, which he was, down in Tacoma, which is 2 hours away from me. So I was driving down, taking care of him, navigating with him, and for some reason he had something going on with his mentalness that so I ended up having to put him in a home because I couldn't bring him into my house. I couldn't be responsible for him. I knew he would walk out of my house in the middle of the night, and I couldn't do that. I need to have him somewhere I can trust that he would stay. And so with that there again, I had to make decisions that put me kind of in that dark spot. I had so many dreams of him saying, you sold my house and my stuff because I had to, I had to pay for his home, being in a home. So there's just, when we're in those moments.
Now, let me ask you a question while you're in that moment. Did you ever stop? Did you ever stop and go, gee, my dad died. My mom had Lou Gehrig's disease. My uncle had Lou Gehrig's disease. I handled all of this. I've got a beautiful baby. I've got a wonderful husband who's now sober.
8 years later. At this time, he was not.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have been either. So, but okay, but and you had navigated through all of this stuff, and you were still here.
Yes.
You were still alive. And did it ever dawn on you on how special an individual you are to be able to get through all that?
People tell me that.
And you don't believe it because that's not the story.
No, because I believe it. I actually believe it that there's something in me,
You
and I
do
understand.
now, but you didn't then.
Then I did not then, but I've always been intuitive, so I always had this inner voice in me somewhere that said, even when I was a teen, and when I was a young teen, 13, something like that, that I was being bullied and nobody wanted to be my friend and all that story. And I was thinking, do I want to even be here? And there was a part of me that said, hell yeah. There's that part of me that I always believe the life isn't a cup half full or a cup half empty. It's smack in the middle. And what I make of that perception is what I make of it.
Oh well, yeah. Well, see, and that's what I wanted to get to with this discussion that we're having today, and we're talking. By the way, that over there is Natasha, and Angelic Clarifications is her website. You should go see her, and she is really quite gifted, and it's very difficult to talk about your own issues the way that
Yes.
you do because it's so easy to hide them and to hide the fact that you were, as you said at the top of the hour, that you were human, and
Yes.
it was a big problem being human, and but over time you have overcome that to understand why those things happen to you
Yes.
and that you can be of service to help other people that are going through what they deem to be as bad a situation as what you don't.
And for them it is. And for
Sure.
them it is because that is the thing is that nobody has worse off than better than. It's what can we put up with in our individuality. Now maybe I did be able to put up with it a little bit more. Maybe I was gifted with a father who gave me some of those subliminal tools, because he used to walk around the house saying get excited. But also too, I know that he had dyslexia so bad that he could not read vowels. So when he would see like the word love, he would go he couldn't graduate high. He couldn't graduate going through school because he couldn't barely read. But he put himself through GED, and then a couple years later, with my mom's help, went through chiropractic school and become one of the best chiropractors of Western Washington. So with he passed away back when I was 28 years old. So that was back in, let's see, when did he pass away? Let's see, my kid is 26 years old. So 26 years ago, because Scott was born 6 weeks after my dad died. So
What was his last name and where did he practice?
he practiced in Ballard.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't know him because
Yeah.
I went to a chiropractor way back in the 80s, and that was in Federal Way. But I just wanted to give your dad kudos a little bit because you understand. I'm sure you do because you were his daughter. You understand how difficult chiropractic school is and how
Yes.
long it takes you to go through that and how difficult it is to graduate. And
Especially in the 70s. It was in the 70s when this was a new horizon. This was something that it was not a well-oiled machine. He was actually one of the first. He went back to St. Louis to Logan College, so he was one of the first, not the first chiropractors that went through it, but he was part of the first process of that because I was 3 years old when we moved back to St. Louis.
it was the first wave of when chiropractic became a much more accepted practice, a much more mainstream
Exactly.
practice.
And he did applied kinesiology, which is basically working with the computer system of the body. It's muscle testing. It was that next layer. It's not just going in and going crunch, crunch, crunch. It was, let me see why this is happening instead of, you need just adjusting.
So your dad just told me, he asked me to ask you, are you using kinesiology in your life?
I am.
Yeah, okay. Well then, so
See,
there.
I muscle test. I muscle test. Um, what should I eat sometimes?
Ah, do you ever muscle test on whether or not you should take a job or whether or not any of the
Mm-hmm.
big things?
Mm-hmm.
And so
So what it
explain.
is where you put your two fingers together,
Yeah,
okay, and then you put two fingers together,
yeah.
and then you put them inside of one another,
Okay.
okay, and then you go, what is my yes? And you try to these two fingers, the quacky fingers, you try to pull those apart, okay.
Oh,
So then you go, what is my yes? What is my no? What is my maybe?
see now I do it a different way where you take them and go like this, and
Yeah, that doesn't that doesn't work for me.
oh, it works for me great because if it's a no, I they come apart easily. If
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I'm supposed to do, then I can't get them apart regardless.
So,
Anything.
and I'm going to stand up for a minute here because there's another one that I do. So, like if I'm standing at like the grocery store and I want to pick out, should I pick out apples? Should I pick out grapefruit? So, what is my yes? What is my no? And you have to make sure that you're staying balanced. You know, you don't
Mhm.
want to fall on your face or anything like that, but that's
Mm.
another way. So, there's different ways that you can engage with yourself differently. Now, I personally, it's kind of like using the pendulum. I personally would not use it. Uh, you have to be careful how you can influence your own knowledge.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, and I will tell you, did you ever hear about a guy by the name of he went by the Amazing Kreskin?
Vaguely.
He was a magician, and he used a pendulum
Mm-hmm.
in his work. And I figured out when, because we had the board game, and I figured out that the pendulum can be manipulated.
It can be. It really can be. And that's one thing that when I started finding out that I had to start going inside myself for my answers, following my own tuition, my pendulum didn't work. But like for me, I wear stones. And the one thing you want to make sure when you're using a pendulum is that you keep your fingers still. A lot of people start doing this and
Oh
they
yeah,
think that it's working.
that's how you can manipulate them. But you can also manipulate them in a very subtle way, if you and you can do it with your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
You can. And that's one thing that is this my yes. And you know, you're gonna kind of your arm's gonna move naturally just a little bit because of the motion of something working. And then stone, tell me what your no is.
so you know when it goes back to, and now it's going back and forth instead of a circle.
And
And
if we wait, it'll probably start going backwards in another in the circle.
because you
And
just made it do that, because you're basically your mind just did that. So
and I am very powerful. I am very powerful that way. That's why I kind of gone through, you know, my kiosk to get my car started or unlocked or that kind of thing. I've gone through about 10 of those in the 10 years I've owned my car. So I go through about a battery a year.
so what was, because this conversation is turning out, well, they always turn out exactly the way that they're supposed to.
Yes.
But this is turning out well because, see, your dad had an inner knowing about life and about who he was, and was highly successful at what he did, even though he was not perfect.
Oh
Uh,
gosh, no.
and to do what he did was a wonderful thing for him and for those around him. And his story was, there's nothing that I cannot do. I'm sure. I'm sure he felt like he could do, if he was dyslexic and made it through chiropractic school and then opened up a business and became a successful businessman as a chiropractor. That's not easy. That's hard to do.
No, it's not. But like I was saying on Monday, you know, us dyslexics, tag me too. I didn't start really reading until after high school. So when my uncle was dealing, he was in Madigan Hospital. He was on reserves at the time he got diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. I had to deal with the military. I am so grateful. He had a friend who would read the paperwork for me because I could not read the paperwork and understand in my mental state of being stressed. I know that there was some brain cells that got fried, me having babies and going through the death of my parents at the same time. That when I get stressed, I can't concentrate. It's just something in me that I know that something got fried. And I just understand that I look back and go, oh, I wrote that. Oh, okay. I'll fix that now.
Well, but those things happen, but now that you can laugh about it.
I can laugh about it because that's where I have an understanding that and this is a tool that I gained. Remember, this is something I've been practicing for several years, a lot of years. That whatever is going on with me, I call her my dyslexic self, you know. But when she starts saying, I say, remember, who's in control? Not one of us. Nobody's in control here. So we're going to work as a team because there's a part of me that knows what to do, and I'm going to trust that. And that's who's speaking today because the human side of me is a pretty stressed out, not stressed out. I want to change that word. It's not stressed out, but just preoccupied with what's been going on around me today.
I get it. Oh, I understand completely. But how do you help people who are sitting in their house? There's 1.5 million of us that are sitting in our houses. We are not able to do what we would like to be able to do.
And that's part of it is realizing that we can't do what we want to do. Understand that is depression. That is grief. That is a form of grief. That is a form of depression that can be dishonoring. I kind of picture emotions are like a spoke on a wheel. And that spoke on our wheel can go around and around. So if we're happy and we're happily nice, it goes around the wheel. But when we get stuck in an emotion, it's like the spoke of the wheel, a bicycle wheel, has spokes. It pokes through the wheel and it can't move. And that's when we get into an emotion that just starts overriding us.
How do you get it to move? That's what I want you to tell me and make it easy for everybody.
It's called acknowledging it. Acknowledge that, oh, fuck, I am in grief. I am sad about not being able to go to my restaurant that I love so dearly because it closed down. I'm pissed off about it. I am really pissed off about it. Verbalize it. Say it. I am pissed off about it. Punch a pillow if you need to. Do it respectfully, though. Do it respectfully. Take a notepad and write down all your emotions and then rip it up and throw it away. Release the emotion in you safely. I want to name that safely. Write it down, punch a pillow, scream at the top of your lungs when nobody's home.
Get your husband up.
No.
Sorry, that was a joke, but you were in the middle of that. And that was...
No, that's why I said alone, because sometimes we have to not let others see us in the emotional state that we're in order to let it out.
Okay.
Many of us can't be vulnerable enough to show emotions around others.
Oh, that I would be willing to venture to guess that's most of us.
Yes. And so with that, though, that's where many a times, like for me, my husband being alcoholic at the time was not a safe person to show myself very vulnerably. Probably and not. So I had to wait till he went to bed before I can shut off all the lights, and put on, some kind of movie that made me sorrowful. And I found it naturally. It was easy to find because I was in that mode, so it was easy to find.
So in your experience, you wanted to feel fully the emotions of sorrow and grief so that you could work through them.
Yes, because the fact that I have learned through observation and So both ways, that when we do not acknowledge our emotions, they're going to pop up and scream at us. So if we don't say that I'm angry about not being able to go to the grocery store when I want to go, we get angry with our family members. We get angry with our friends. We get angry with our cars. We get angry with our coworkers. We get angry with anybody and everybody, including ourselves, including, that's where we start throwing things. That's where we start, doing these things because we have this anger that is not spoken safely. That's where, kind of like when I had an ex-husband who did coke and pot at the same time. We moved 7 times in 3 years, and he stole money from my parents. When I decided to divorce him, you should have seen the pictures I drew. I drew pictures of people stabbing people. I was angry, but what did I do? I ripped it up really tightly so nobody else could see it, and I threw it away, because that was the emotion coming out at that time and it needed to be sent away. I did not want to keep it anymore.
And how do you feel about humor helping out in this whole process?
Well, like I said, that's where, like, if I was in the right place, that's where I would choose to turn on something. Like even today, sometimes I turn on MASH, because MASH is one of my home things. It's one of the things that I grew up with that makes it homey for me. That, even though it's not necessarily always happy, but there's always those kind of like snarky, sarcastic things that just kind of come out. And Alan Alda actually reminds me of my dad. My dad looked a lot like him. So it's one of my ways to kind of go home too at the same time when I'm looking at him.
The next time that you sit down and watch MASH, as the helicopters are coming in, and the helicopters land and the music is playing, I want you to look at the blonde nurse running towards the chopper.
Okay.
Who's got a unbelievable moment of empathy and love, and every time it makes me tear up every time I see her. She's a marvelous actress, apparently, but it was that moment of empathy and trying to help, and that was to me. Didn't matter what was on after that. It was a great show.
Well, and that's because all the characters knew the integrity that they needed to hold for the story that they were trying to tell.
Exactly.
And I honor them for that. That I honor them for that, and so. And that's another reason why Carol Burnett is my go-to. When Tim Conway is doing his little old man shuffle. It's just kind of.
If you haven't seen the elephant that Tim Conway does, if you haven't seen that, ladies and gentlemen, go on YouTube.
It's getting me now.
It's a blooper about Carol Burnett and Tim Conway. Nobody could keep a straight face for a long.
No, actually, they had bets. How fast could he get? Because it was Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. How fast he can crack up Harvey Korman?
when he did the dentist. Do you remember that skit where he did the dentist and he kept injecting himself with a Novocaine, and then he made Harvey Korman wet his pants.
I know he did. And then I like the other one where he's on the clothes hanger and he's going around and back and forth.
Yep. And then
we can go on and on and on. But that's the point, though. That's the point, though, that we have to sometimes say to self, enough. Enough. We have to find some place in us that says, enough. I have to get up metaphorically out of the chair, or even out of the chair, and do something that's opposite of where you were. So that means that music brings you home, if a TV show brings you home, if just even opening up the door and looking outside brings you home, do something that sends you to a spot of kind of that going, I don't want to call it going backwards, but it's kind of like eating that soul food. We have to go back to something that gives us that positive soul moment, that soul food moment. And if we can do that, let ourselves be for a few minutes. I give myself maybe 4 hours, to have an emotion. And then, okay, you've run your course. Now who's in control? you know, and you move on, or you let something move you on. There's some days where I'm grateful that I have, a session that I have to do, or that, my husband comes home from golf and he tells his story, or, there's something that happens in my day that can help me shift out of it, but I have to be willing to meet it. I have to be willing to have the perception to say, oh, I have something here that can bring a smile to my face.
Absolutely.
And soon that smile to face kind of goes to smile in the being, and then a smile in the heart. And then finally, there's sometimes the smile in the mind. Because the mind's always the last to say, oh, I kind of like being a victim of my life. I like to be the story of my life. I like to have the negatives of my life. I get benefits for being negative. And the mind starts saying things that are controlling. And this is what I like to work with in sessions is how does our mind overrule our body, spirit, and emotions? If we all sat them at a round table, who would not shut up? Probably the mind.
Or me.
Or you?
I have as a famous comic once said that I have the right to remain silent, but I just don't have the ability.
Mm-hmm.
That's more along my lines. But just want to share with you, and I don't know if it'll help anybody or not, but I enjoy this process. I enjoy the process of life. I've had some good times and I've had some bad times, but I've always enjoyed wondering what was going to happen next.
Yes.
And it's been really quite an enjoyable ride overall. Now, when my wife committed adultery, that wasn't quite such a good time. When all my friends left, and when I hit the trestle with a U-Haul trailer and destroyed that, and that wasn't such a good day. But overall, I enjoy the process of what's going to happen next, because something will, whether you want it to or not. So you might as well enjoy the ride. That's
exactly. And there again is shifting the perception. Is the glass empty? Is it full? Or is it in the middle, and what we make of it is what counts? Now, some of us have chemical needs. That's where some people. I am grateful. People don't, they find out you didn't do anything during this time, like going through the depression of my mom and my dad and my uncle. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I didn't take any drugs for depression or anything. They don't deal with me well. I get the side effects. I get so bad that, like, when I was on birth control pills, I was shaking so bad I couldn't hold on to anything. Literally, I was shaking.
You're one of those people that shouldn't have medication at all. But ultimately,
no.
that for you, that turned out to be a real plus and a real positive, because as things go down the poop hole, as I call them,
Yes.
it's real easy to start. That's what there are, like Schick Shadle, which is the
yes, I know what it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they are now like, are you spending too much time alone at home? Do you feel like you're drinking too much now that you're just staying home? Well, come over to our house. We'll help you out. And it's and a lot of people are in that. Apparently, alcohol and pot sales are way up.
They are. I mean, our corner store is busy morning to night. It's okay to do something to help survive. Some of us need that chemical support to get us through that edge. Now, I'm going to ask, though, who's controlling who? If our alcohol is speaking louder than our emotions, and I only know this by being married to two different people who had a big problem. And I witnessed them. and both of them had mental things that they were working through that they were afraid to work through, so they covered it up.
Sure.
Now I have other friends that do get support through the doctor and having something work through to help them chemically work through things, and they're finding the right mixture and they're willing to work through things. They're willing to kind of help themselves get through it. And some of them are working themselves off the meds. Some of them need to stay on a little bit longer because of the triggers that their chemical balance cannot handle. But it's finding the niche that works for you. But the one thing that I so enjoy doing through a session is going back and finding out what is the key. What can we do to help you navigate through this story that I can help you get into the reason why the story happened. Now, after the death of my parents and everything, my husband even says, "You're not the same woman I married." I used to be so shy and quiet that I wouldn't speak, and now
Well, fortunately, that you changed in a good way.
I'm thankful. I'm grateful that I'm grateful I had the tools, and I'm grateful that I had the ability to have the muscle to get stronger to get here. Because I can tell you, right after my mom passed, that muscle, I tell people I had to start at my ankles and say I love you, because I didn't love the rest of myself. You
You
know,
know,
I didn't love. I had to start loving my ankles. Thank you, ankles, for supporting me in my day-to-day walk. Thank you, toes, for maneuvering so I can balance myself.
well, that's pretty cool. Now, the only part that I would worry about is if they started answering back.
Well, actually, they do.
Oh, okay. Well, and so you don't need medication. You already are on one team.
Kind of crazy. If people knew how many voices were going off in my head, they kind of think I'm a little bit strange. But I'm grateful I'm intuitive, and I know that it's my higher self, my inner self. Sometimes it's my dyslexic self. Sometimes it's these parts of me that are my tools to help me be who I am today. They help me navigate. Oh, wait a minute, anger is reaching up. Anger, you want to talk to us right now? Okay, let's talk. Sadness, you want to talk right now? Kind of like when I was getting ready for this, I went and lit a couple candles to start changing my shifting myself, because I was kind of in this spot where, oh, shoot, I made a wrong. I said something wrong about maybe somebody. Ooh, ooh. But I have to kind of go in and go, oh well, please forgive me.
Well, I will tell you, if you do this long enough, you're going to say something stupid about somebody somewhere. It just
It's called life. It's called life. It is called life.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So, Natasha, we've been doing this for an hour, and I think it's great, and I hope that we've helped somebody at least feel a little bit lighter in themselves today, and feel a little bit better about and understand. If you want to go talk to Natasha, that you can go to
angelicclarifications.com, or Natasha at angelicclarifications is my email.
And my podcast is called My Independence Report. I've got 140 some odd great people, and I'm working with Natasha a lot of late, and we're going to be doing a lot more with, as a matter of fact, there are actual human beings that are listening to this live. I just thought I'd point that out.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
I'm grateful.
So, and there will be more, and as we go down the road, but I just think it's wonderful that you're doing what you're doing, and we're going to do really well. We're going to do really well together over time.
And I do hope that, Kevin, I did answer a slight bit of your question about how do you navigate out of what we go through.
Well, like I said, we are going to talk more about that on Monday when we have our Life Between Lives, because I'm going to introduce, and yeah, you already blew it because you already know this, but there are people that are wondering why I would say your life is empty and meaningless, and that is a saying that people reject, because my life isn't empty, my life isn't meaningless. Well, I'm going to explain how that works and why you can create the life that you always wanted to live if you want to do what you do. Go ahead.
because it's possible.
Yeah.
I was a very dyslexic, couldn't read, didn't want to speak out, didn't want to have a voice, didn't even want to be seen, heard, known. I was the shy, quiet person in the corner that nobody knew. I went to my 10th and high school reunion, and people said, "You were in our class." And now I flipped that box over and become who I was, but I was willing to meet life. I was willing. That's the key word, is willing. Some of us aren't willing. And like I was talking to my kid today about feeling better about technology, because I think I've come through some huge wall with that. That that my kid said, Mom, that was part of your mind was telling you you couldn't.
Right. Right. When I
And
went to my
I kind of wanted to say, oh, we all have that, babe. We all have that.
when I went to my 20th class reunion, and because some of us may have, like changed a little bit and stuff, they would give you a little tag with your picture on it.
Mm-hmm.
I was wearing the tag. I was standing there, and a girl walked up to me. She looked at my tag and said, "Oh, I remember him." I was standing right there, and she said, "I remember that guy." And it's like, I am that guy. No. So, but you just got to let stuff like that go and relax and have a good time, because you're not getting out of it alive anyway. So you might as well relax and enjoy it while you're here.
Exactly. We have this body shape, this body, the skin once in our life. We got to make the better of it that we can. I'm not saying best of it. I'm not saying perfect of it. I'm saying better of it. Sometimes we have to be sad and sorrowful and then decide in, maybe an hour or two to say, okay, you had your time. Now it's my time. I'm going to turn on some music, and whatever works, I'm going to do what I can do.
I don't know about you, but I've seen this happen. Like in closing, I've seen this happen a bunch of times, where somebody who is heavy, has been heavy for a very long time. They'll go in and they'll have gastric bypass
Yes.
surgery, and they'll lose 100 pounds. The next time you look at them, they've gained 110.
Yes.
It is who we are, and how you are destined to be. Just take care of yourself, and so that you're healthy.
Exactly. And perception can either change your life or keep your life at exactly where it's at.
If you believe, like I said the other day, when talking about my mother-in-law, who believed that because she was adopted that nobody loved her, and she
Mm-hmm.
carried that with her whole life because she believed it, and she told herself that every day of her life.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody loves me because I'm adopted. Had she changed the paradigm into everybody loves me because I'm adopted, and my family loves me, and my new family, they're great, and my birth mother, I forgive her, and I let that go, and it would have changed the dynamic of her life, her daughter's life, her husband's life,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole family. The dynamic would have changed.
And
And
it's not always easy, and it's not always something that is something we can do 24/7. But we have to start practicing that muscle. It's kind of like I've heard, pick up the 2 pound weight, then later pick up the 5 pound weight, then later pick up, because you've practiced to do better. And so that's all I can wish for you, is know that you are worthy of having sunshine in your life. You are worthy of being able to be who you are. You are worthy for having ease and grace in your life. It's just us saying, I deserve it.
when you say I'm worthy, and you get back from this place in the back of your head that says, no, you're not. You're just a stupid little kid who'll never amount to anything. Then what
Then you
you
got to
have,
say,
you got to say, go away, shut up.
mm-hmm.
And that's just not so.
As I was going down on the freeway on the first time on the radio saying, am I in alignment with this? And there's a part of me that said, hell no. And I said, well, screw it. You are. Come along for the ride. We're heading south. We're in alignment with this, kid. Come on.
There we are. By the way, that's Natasha. How do they get a hold of you again, my dear?
You get a hold of me by angelicclarifications.com, www, or Natasha at angelicclarifications.com.
And you can get a hold of me by grabbing my left arm or right arm. You can do any, never mind.
And we'll be here every Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific time.
So tell your friends if you want some fun, if you want some uplifting thoughts, we go somewhere else. No, we'll
we'll try. We'll do our best being human and have somebody smile with us.
Yeah, maybe next time, since we got to hear about your bad country music song, maybe next time we'll do about my bad country.
Oh, I like it. Yes, I would be grateful to hear your story.
It was well, you don't get the whole thing, you just get the bad parts. Those are the really fun, juicy ones.
They're the really fun, juicy ones. Yes. Because I know in my story, I had angels in my life during that year. I had caregivers that would lift my mom when I couldn't. My husband, who was drunk all the time, for some reason, in the moment that he would take my mom and put her to bed, was sober as anything, and would put her in bed easier than anybody else. So, I had angels in my time, and those were the graces that the universe brings into you if you're willing to see it.
And bless your soul and bless your angel soul, because you can help people because you've been through the war.
I've been through the war, and we all have angels and we all have guides to help us. We just got to be willing to see them.
We do. Of course we do. There.
Blessings to everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you on Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Yes, indeed. Take care. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.